Hello.
Howdy. Brandon, are you good to present?
Yeah, give me a second, get some windows moved around, but sure. We need to change the date on this thing. It's not March the 7th.
So last week we switched to HackMD. So if people are wondering, this is the new link.
This means we're not supposed to be modifying the doc, the like Google Doc notes OCI reference types working group.
Correct.
Okay, I will note that in there so that I stop making this mistake in the future.
Probably should put the Zoom link or the HackMD link at the top. Oh, you got to be an anonymous buffalo today.
Well, I was anonymous.
All right, so I should get this ready to just do some sharing here. Not a lot to share on this side. I could probably always pull up some other drawing stuff and do pretty pictures or something, but let's do this. It's about 5 minutes after. My laptop is crying in pain from all the stuff that I'm making it do today. And I'm going to avoid making the mistake of not having the chat open. Get that open up now because I know people will have stuff to talk about and I won't see it otherwise. All right, ready to roll?
Yep.
Not waiting on anybody else? Okay. So yeah, this is the no changes proposal. I don't think we had anything else on the agenda other than that, right? We wanted to talk about proposal D and the rubric too. Okay, we can talk about that later on. I'll save you some time. So yeah, no changes. We're good. That's it. How do we do this? I'm looking at OCI artifacts. I'm looking at image spec. I'm looking at some other people who have already done some of this work before. Some of this comes out of what Cosign had done on their side. Some of this comes out of Justin working on some things from his part. A lot of it just comes at looking at what OCI has out of the box already with artifacts, the image spec, annotations, the index, whatever else we've got out there we can play with. And so for anybody that's not familiar with it, this is just a image manifest for potentially an artifact. The idea is you just change the media type on your artifact on the config. And that's how you reference that we're going to have this kind of artifact out there, and then put whatever you need to put in there. And more than likely, this is what we're going to have no matter what we're doing with reference types already. So this part should be unchanged from what references are doing, unless we introduce a whole new media type, which potentially I think we've got at least 1 or 2 proposals out there thinking about doing that. But if we don't change how we're doing the artifacts themselves in there, this is just what comes out of the box with OCI today. And so then the question is, how do we attach it? How do we connect that artifact we just made to whatever we are pushing up there? And I said, let's just use an index. And so if I create an index out there right now, this is just on the Docker notation, this is a manifest list, but it's just a collection of manifest. And so the first one up there is the manifest I want to refer to. And it's got its digest. I said, okay, assume its digest is 010101. And then I'm just going to create another entry in that manifest list that says this is an artifact. And the way I'm saying that this is an artifact is, for one, the annotation just has this artifact to true flag in there, vendor OCI artifact and set to true. If that's set to true, I'm just saying, okay, at that point, whatever my artifact detection code is, that just keys off of that, and we're good to go. I did start including some other stuff in here, which started confusing a few people, I think. But if we want to do extra filtering on this, so we don't have to query each one of these individually, we can put other annotations in there as well. And this can be more than just this one thing. We can have a whole bunch of them in here to know that this artifact that we might want to potentially pull has this data inside of it. And so we know which artifacts we might want to query later on. If we're a signature tool out there, we know which ones we want to go query later on. Might also include hashes of which key signed it, or if it's SBOM, it might include that this is the SBOM in this format versus that format. Gives people an idea of whether or not they want to query or not. I did keep the platform the same in both. And so that might scare some people, that might help some people out. That's how I'm associating these two together, is they're the same platform, but this one just says I've got this annotation. And the reason I'm able to get away with that is because I conveniently added a pull request a while back that said, in the OCI image spec, if multiple manifest match from the client standpoint, pick the first one. If you don't know how to differentiate the two, then you should pick the first one. Now, if you're looking for an artifact, you do know how to differentiate the two. You're looking for that annotation, and so you will pick the second one. But if you're looking for the image, you would pick the first one because you don't know what that second thing is. They look the same to you, so you just pick the first one. So that's how I'm throwing it in there. And so this works if we're pushing up something like a whole tag. If we're the artifact originator, we want to attach the artifact to our AMD 64 image, to our ARM 64 image, all the other platforms out there. You can just make your index and then put all these artifacts in that same index. And now you ship the whole thing out. You got one big thing out there. It's got one tag pointing to it. So it works well in that scenario. The other thing I threw in here is if you've got some really small artifacts, maybe we just put them in there as an annotation. I'm not super firm on this one. I threw out like a whole bunch of different things in this proposal, and we might pick and choose out of this thing and say we like A, we don't like B, we don't like C. Of course, I'm using letters, and I should be using numbers because this is proposal D, and I don't want to confuse with all the other proposals. But we might just throw something in there as, hey, here's an artifact for this thing. It's just right in here. Put it in line. Nothing else to ship anywhere else. No other files, because this is just a regular image right here, and we just do an annotation out there that's included in there. So that'll be a second option of how we could include the artifact. It's just throw it right in there as an annotation directly. So if we do that, we're going to have this repo tag, and that'll work. Jason, you want me to take your question now? I had to go to stopping point.
No. Go ahead.
Keep going. All right. So if we do that, we've got the repo tag, and that's what we already had before. And so that works as a good way to say, I've got this tag, let me query it, pull it down, and now I can just query all the artifacts in there together. It doesn't work as good if you're pulling down a manifest by digest, unless you're pulling the index. And so if you ship the digest to the index, then you can pull it that way as well. So we can cover those two scenarios as long as the digest is the index, not the individual image manifest. Once you get into the next layer down, you start saying, okay, I want to verify other digests, maybe the image digest itself. Then there are other options out there like the repo tagging that we've seen before. That's what Cosign has been doing on their side. It seems to work okay enough. It's not the greatest, but probably better than all the other options out there. I think, it's horrible except for every other choice out there is the best way you can say it. And so we got the SHA-256 dash and whatever the digest is in there. And then there is a dot. I shouldn't have used ... and then a extra dot in the middle there, but there is a literal dot in there and then the type. And so whatever your digest is, dot and then sig or something like that, or .sbom or something along those lines. And that would be your tag on your image. So you would know that, hey, this thing is not really a digest, it's a tag. And the digest itself that's in this tag is pointing to our image digest. And so that's how you can, when I pull the digest for my image, I say, okay, here's that digest. Let me go query the registry and see if there are any of these other artifacts that I'm looking for attached to it. And if that's not enough, and people say, well, that's fine until we start pushing two of them. Well, if you push 2 or 3 or 4 more signatures on image, you could make index out there for that one. So we could have an index, just a whole bunch of artifacts in there, and we can append to that. That would be an option. Or the other option is that we just start introducing a hash on whatever we're putting in there. And so you just hash whatever your new object is you're creating in there, and you just include that as part of your digest on your artifact that you're pushing up in addition to that. So this is more for deduplication. And then this is how you query it, which is whatever the digest is that's on the image you're querying. So between all of these, I think we cover a lot of different scenarios. It just kind of gets ugly. Do we want all these solutions, or do we want to start decluttering this and saying, okay, we're only going to pick 2 out of the 4 possibilities in here? I'm throwing them all on the table, seeing what spaghetti or pasta sticks on the wall when it's all thrown out there. So that's what I've got. Josh, Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I love this because no changes. Like this proposal's superpower is it doesn't need any changes. People just need to start adopting it, right? Like this looks like clients adopting this just look like pushing items to an index, or modifying indexes and tagging them this way. I think there are some small issues that we need to work out that probably we know about and probably aren't even related to this proposal so much as are related to changes we need to make to stuff in general. The data issue, the inlining the data issue, I think now that the data field is approved in OCI, I don't think we should come up with a second flavor of it just for us.
So this isn't necessarily a different flavor of data, but this data here is not this digest. This data here is the digest of your artifact itself. Or are you saying that you want to push a second descriptor down here with its own data field?
I think more the second one. I think that
okay.
if we have 2 ways of inlining data, that it gets confusing. One's an annotation and one's a real field. I don't feel strongly. It's not like a deal breaker at all. I just think that was the initial impetus for me raising my hand, was another data field seems cumbersome. I think in the spirit of changes we should make to OCI anyway that will affect this, we had that proposal from forever ago in the distribution spec about recommending HTTP eTag semantics to avoid races. That's going to come up here, right? Like if 2 people want to sign at the same time, they're going to conflict, they're going to race, and one's going to win. So we should call that out as in order to, you can say I am specifically signing this version of this thing, but the first 2 of those proposals, they'll race if 2 people try to sign them.
Yeah. And that's why I definitely say the very first one here is more than likely you shouldn't be dealing with any races at all. You're probably the originator of this artifact and the image and everything else. You're just creating all this up front. The second proposal definitely has races. And so it's kind of a question of, do we need to pick between this? Does the end user need to pick between these? Because the hash in this case is the hash on whatever artifact you're getting ready to push up there. It's not the hash on the thing you've signed. And so it's not a repeat of this first digest already.
Right. That isn't to say that we already have the race problem today. We already have a problem with two people pushing the different digests to the same tag. And e-tags is the answer for that. So unrelated to this. Is it correct to say that signing an index changes its digest? If I have a multi-platform image index for Alpine and it's signed by 3 people and I want to add my 4th signature, that changes its digest, right?
That's what I didn't get into here. And it's a really good question, which is how do we sign an index? And we could potentially say that, okay, this is going to be the top level index. And then there is this first entry here is itself an index. And then we have the signature on that index here. And so this index wouldn't have its digest changed. You just have another index pointing to an index that then gets you your data.
Right.
If we get to that, though, I can very likely see that there are probably going to be some runtimes that don't like that.
Yeah, runtimes are like, I think that obviates all of the benefit of this is that nobody needs to make changes. And if in the course of making there be no changes to image spec and distribution spec, we require a bunch of changes on runtime spec or a bunch of changes on unspecified runtime behavior, then I think that's a loss. And
so in those cases, I would be pushing to probably use one of these digest tags just to avoid that.
Where
the digest,
the
digest tag would point to your artifact itself for an index of the artifacts. And then from that point, your index itself is unchanged.
So the image originator, whoever is building Alpine, can sign it by 3 people. And then if I want to add my 4th one, it would be in a different location outside in the repo SHA-256 format.
Yep.
Okay. And so runtimes who want to verify would have to pull I'm saying signatures, but you imagine that I'm also saying S-bombs or ice cream or whatever. Pull stuff embedded in the original index from the originator and go discover things using the tag schemes and collate them, merge them, and then do stuff. That's fine. I'm just trying to clarify.
Yeah, and the question is, how many of these do we want to include in our, whatever we come out with it? I'm throwing a whole lot of these things out there. We might say, number 2 doesn't give us any value. We've got 3 and 1. Those kind of solve all the cases we want to solve. Why I have a second one in the middle there. So we may end up going that direction. That way, we're just dealing with throwing that extra hash out there, and that's how you would add to it after the fact.
Gotcha.
The downside is that you have to list all the tags to be able to find these things in that case.
You have to list that format 3.
You wouldn't know
tags. Yeah.
You wouldn't know what that hash is on the individual artifacts. You're going to have to find the artifacts, and so it's going to take you a little bit extra work.
You wouldn't need to list for 1 or 2 though.
Correct, and that's why I like those 2 are nice for speed. Number 3 is nice for that flexibility.
Nice. Okay. I'll Nisha, go ahead.
Actually, Josh has a number of questions listed.
You can go ahead, Nisha. I feel like there's going to be a number of questions. So if people want to get it out of their minds, put it in HackMD. Go ahead.
Okay. My question was, do we have to reserve some of these annotations so they're consistent across clients? Because you've said you can use a vnd.oci.artifact. That sounds like a reserved annotation to me.
Well, vnd.oci, I believe we are. I'm under that impression just seeing that we've used that in other places. And so just because of that, I was using that one, and I would assume that we would at that point define this is what we mean when we say that as OCI.
Sorry, just to surface the chat, because I know it's sometimes doesn't bubble up, especially in recordings. If the annotation key was org.opencontainers dot something something dot something, then it would be pre-reserved. The VND prefix isn't for OCI stuff, really. But these are all, stand-in strings we can replace with other stuff.
Yeah,
But that would indicate a change then to the spec. Right.
Right, a change to the spec only to reserve the details and semantics of specific annotation keys. But as far as image spec changes go, those are one of the easier ones to do than to mint whole new types.
Yeah, I should have used org open containers.
That's, I mean, yeah, it's a search and replace.
Yeah.
Done other annotation ads before. It's not really a change to the spec as opposed to a clarification.
Yeah. And anything with org.opencontainers is called out as being like sort
It's
of
ours.
pre-reserved. Yeah.
Sajay?
Are you open to maybe adding one more annotation in there, which is pointing to the actual digest of the image to which that signature belongs? So right now you have artifact type and whether it's an artifact true and sig like that. If you had an SBOM in there, can we say that this SBOM or the signature or this entity is actually linking to this parent manifest over there?
It might make more sense to just change the definition of this one annotation to say
Yeah.
it should be the digest, and that makes a lot of sense to me.
Right. Thank you.
Yep. Our note takers catching all these good ideas down, right?
A number of us are. I just put myself as note taker because nobody said I'm going to be one.
Hey, so I had a list, and they're in the HackMD, of just tiny questions. One, so at the very bottom of this document, you have the very last item, something.hash.
Yeah.
Hash, like what is hash?
A short hash of the
Because-
artifact itself.
Well, what do you mean by short hash? Because the one thing I pulled out of the distribution spec is like the length of the tags is
Yeah.
limited.
Yeah, and that's why I said short. I didn't go through and figure out what that length was and then figure out how we can, what our length limits are on these things, but I do want to make sure that we don't break that limit.
Okay, the next thing was, so it looks like the way that you would link things is via the index. And I could see that becoming an issue if you wanted to link many things over time. And so I'm wondering, does that mean that this index can just grow indefinitely? And
I would,
follow up to that, is there a limit on actual, well, I think there is, we have a 4 megabyte limit, which,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, there is the 4 megabyte limit. I would try to reserve putting things in this format to the originator. And then anything else that's being appended over time, as time goes on, to probably go in this last third format here, which would be unique for each individual artifact you're pushing. The downside of that is there's no easy query option at that point.
Can you clarify the originator pattern?
If you're pushing up something for Docker library or something like that, this would be Docker Inc. saying, okay, we're going to put the annotations on all of our official library images up here at this point. If you clone that image down and copy it into your, example.org repo that you're running as a company, and you want to sign the Alpine thing yourself, you would add the signature in the third format to say, okay, I've signed this as we ingested it. And so you wouldn't actually modify the Alpine index, you would just add your signature on the side.
And at which point
But
it's also up to you to move that. If you're moving, Alpine originated it and signed it with 3 people, you bring it in, you sign it with 2 more people in the third format there. and you want to move it to somewhere else, you now have to move the originated Alpine image and any discovered attached things with it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Josh, I think I cut you off.
No, that's totally fine. I did forget what I was saying, but next question. So it seems like the big downside with this whole thing is a lack of server-side query. So
Yeah, you're
yeah,
not
like
going to be able to do
what, like,
filtering
so what would
unless you're
be
querying
though?
the. Go ahead. I keep cutting you off.
No, it's fine. I think it would be possible, but you would just need to download a bunch of stuff and do it client side. Is that kind of?
Yeah. If you're the originator, then potentially they can do the query just by looking at these other fields in there. If you are the end user looking for stuff, you'll get a little bit out of these types, but otherwise you're just going blind, just saying, I need to download all these to figure out, does any of them have a signature that I'm looking for?
Right. Okay.
I
Yeah, and
actually
this is-
still, oh, sorry, I interrupted.
That's going to be a story of me for the day. This is kind of like the fallback scenario that people might find a whole lot better solutions in options A, B, and C. But if we have to fall back to an existing registry that's unmodified, then that might be the downside of doing that fallback. Sorry, Nisha, go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. Can you explain to me again how multiple artifacts get to be linked together if one was pushed before another one was?
So we're not going to link the artifacts together. We'll link the artifact to whatever it's an artifact on top of. And so assuming it's like a image and we have signatures or SBOMs, I'll pick SBOMs because no one chat with you. So if we have a bunch of SBOMs and say we've got multiple of them, different formats or whatever else going on there, we can push them up there with different tags this way. And the linking comes in with this initial part, the SHA and the digest. And that digest is the digest of the thing that we are signing or the thing that we're attaching our SBOM to.
I'm having, okay, so that means that something else is doing, like all the understanding of how the linking happens is on the client.
It's the client knowing which one of these tags it needs to pull. And so
Yeah.
the client knows that, hey, I'm looking for signatures on whatever this thing is, or digest, artifacts are on top of whatever this image is. And
Yeah.
maybe it had some artifacts in there, but maybe it didn't. And what it knows is that the thing it pulled down had digest SHA 00000. I picked my digest very easy so I can find them later on.
Okay.
Assuming I did get SHA 00000, I go out and look for all the tags that say SHA 256-00000. And if I see a tag with that, I know that is a tag that contains an artifact that is attached to whatever my image is that is pulled.
So does this mean that the server side ought to have some way of fixing tags or creating immutable tags? So
This is all on the client side. The nice thing for immutable tags is that if you go with the hash method, then you can push it once and not have to worry about it, the immutable policy breaking you, because you can just always push another artifact later on that is a separate tag. And so you never change your existing tag out there. But it doesn't require the registry to do anything on its side. It's all client side. Both the client that's pushing the tag and the client that's pulling the tag.
okay, so if the client has to verify that the hash bit is actually pointing to the manifest hash, and if it's different,
Yeah.
then break.
If I see a SHA 12345, I'm not even going to pull it because it's for a different image. So I'm not even going to pull those tags. And then
Right.
when I do pull something that's got this hash on it, if it's a signature, well, you're going to know that it's invalid because the signature is not going to match whatever the artifact that was signed on. If it's an SBOM, I don't know how you solve that. If people throw SBOMs out for different images out there, you need to talk to whoever's got right access to the repo and say maybe they shouldn't be right into that repo.
Okay, thanks.
Got a lot of good questions out in this feed here. Anybody else want to jump up next?
I think I know that garbage collection is a hot topic, but I think this works well given my understanding of how garbage collection is implemented in the wild. I know that it's not specified in any way, but just to talk through it, if I pull in Alpine into my repo signed by 3 upstream originators, and then I add my own signature to it in format 2 or format 3. And then that version of Alpine is deleted from my registry. Like I untag it or I manually delete it or whatever, and those blobs go away. The costly image layer blobs are deleted by garbage collection. But because my signatures are tagged using format 2 or 3, they won't be automatically reaped, which is, I think, fine. Because they're lightweight, like the number of bytes in a signature is low. But I just wanted to, is that also your understanding that garbage collection as it is implemented in the wild shouldn't delete these things?
It shouldn't delete these things, since that is a pro. And if you want to do garbage collection on the client side, then potentially you could go do a listing of all the tags and then query, does digest 000 have a manifest out there, do a quick head request, or that doesn't exist in this repo, let me go ahead and delete this artifact attached to it because there's nothing there to query. So potentially could be implemented on the client side, not ideal, but better than bad.
Yeah, and the benefit of garbage collection in there is more for sort of cleanliness and hygiene in your repo and less about saving money on storage costs or something.
Yeah. And so whatever you've got out there that's generating the signatures and pushing them, if it's able to push in this format, maybe you just need another command out for that same tool that says, let me go out and do a garbage collection on that same repo.
Yeah. Cool.
Or someone like me could always write a third-party tool. That
There's
actually
no one
sounds
else
like a little
like
bit of
you.
fun.
There's no one else.
That
like
actually,
you, Brandon.
it actually sounds like a little bit of fun. I might do that later on today, if only I had that much time.
So is the idea that all of the links are in the index? Is that what I'm understanding?
So I put several options in there. And so if everything is in that index along with the image that you're pushing, I'm assuming you're the originator. And so then your option 1 is just whatever the tag is for that image that you pushed up there. Otherwise, it can be 2 or 3 where it might not be an index. It might just be an individual artifact.
That's where you're just in the tag matching.
Correct. Correct.
So if you promote across, that's what I was trying to understand on the index, because if you're promoting across registries, you want to promote a subset. Is the idea that the index is mutable and the digest of the index is irrelevant? It's just a collection of all the things you're pointing to?
I'm hoping that this one up here stays immutable once the originator has created that image. And so if you're trying to add something else on top of it, then you're creating a different, you're not modifying the original index, you're creating your own tag with your own artifact in there. And so as you're copying
That's how
across
you're
repositories,
differentiating. The originator owns the original index, and then your additions are done as separate. Is it the additions are separate indexes? Because you're still using the index to link them together.
I said number 2 could be either or. You could have it as an individual artifact, or it could be an index, depending on if you just want to add to it over time and you're not worried about race conditions. Otherwise, you're probably more than likely going to option 3. And each of those, there's no point in having an index over there. You could if you pushed up 5 different things at once, but you're probably just going to send an individual artifacts at that point.
So yeah, so the promotion case in this case is copy over the originator's index, including the originator's signatures or SBOMs or whatever, and go and discover, go look for the option 2 or option 3 type things and copy those over to when promoting across registries.
And you can
If
promote a
anybody needs help with that.
subset because you
Sure.
just taking the individual tags that are what you want.
Yeah, it's a client-side operation. Promotion is like
Right.
pull these things. When pulling, you can filter however you want and push whatever. Yeah. Tooling can make this easy.
You can pick a subset of 2 and 3, but the originator has their say in whatever goes in that original image. So you wouldn't be pulling a subset of those.
Does it matter? So for the originator, let's just assume the originator has an image, a signature of the image, an SBOM and a signature of the SBOM, and I'll skip the scan result because the scan results are additive. So if you take just the image and the SBOM, the signatures for them, when you promote those, let's say you're promoting them to another registry, but then when you deploy them, you don't deploy the SBOM, you deploy just the image. It doesn't really matter. So you really haven't broken anything. So you're fine.
The manifest that gets pulled by the the Kubernetes
Runtime.
cluster or whatever would pull the manifest that includes the pointers to the signatures, right? It would pull that second item that says it's the signature for AMD 64 Linux. But
it wouldn't have to.
Oh, it doesn't have to. It shouldn't. It will pull this JSON document. It will see this whole JSON document,
Right.
and then iterate through manifests and say, "Oh, I'm AMD 64 Linux. This is the one for me. I'm pulling this first image," and never read the rest of. Never, consider the rest of that document.
And if it needs signed, then it can query the second one and say, "Okay, let me grab the signature first. Check that. Verify it. Okay, run it."
What was the reason that you had the platform in each of the sub ones as opposed to just the one that's actually the container runtime? Was there a reason for that?
I was associating the two together, but I kind of like the suggestion that we just put the digest right here and just say this is the digest, the thing that we're making that artifact on top of. That might make a cleaner link.
Yeah,
Once you
and
had
then
the digest, you don't need the platform. I was trying to figure out if the platform was there for some reason. That's what I was confused about.
right, the platform
Originally, it
is
was just
only
linking.
there to point to the right thing, but having a platform specified at all might confuse some runtimes. So I think we should get rid of it and just have the digest.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
How do existing runtimes treat an entry in this list that has a media type of image, but doesn't have a platform object? That's probably worth verifying.
Yeah,
Hopefully it
without having a
falls,
platform
because
object.
if it's an SBOM, a Kubernetes cluster can't do anything with an SBOM or a signature anyway. So whether it has
Right,
a
I think that-
platform or not.
I think the question is, right, like if we get rid of the platform for the signature object, that second item in the manifest list, will runtime start to barf on there is no platform here? I was expecting there to be a platform here.
Let me actually pick a really specific example. I'm going to pick a really specific example, which is MySQL running on Mac M1. There is no AMD 64 or ARM 64 version of MySQL, but there would be an AMD 64 over there. And so would it query this list and say, hey, I don't like the AMD 64, but I see this other thing that has no platform on it. Let me just try to run that instead. And that would not be a good scenario.
Yeah, that's the one I'm saying we should probably verify, just to make sure that there aren't any runtimes that see no platform and assume that means this must be for me.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good
just-
idea, but another idea is we could put in some placeholder platform of, architecture equals Brandon and OS equals Mitchell.
I was just
Or
gonna say,
OS is artifact.
Yeah, sure. Something totally, absolutely nonsense so that we can't possibly confuse a runtime.
So the gist of it is that most of the work, we could do this with the spec as is, but most of the querying and the filtering and the content management and discovery happens on the client side.
Yes. Yeah, I put it that way, the clients that need an artifact would implicitly know how to query and do this stuff, because otherwise, what would they need an artifact for if they don't know what they're going to do with it? So they would be able to parse this format and interpret it. And then the registries, I'm going to assume that we're not going to get every registry updated simultaneously. There are going to be people that have old versions of Artifactory or whatever else out there for years. And then the client pushing the artifact, well, if you're going to push a signature, you need to know how to push it already. And so I'm assuming those two pieces that need to work together are the ones that can be updated. And that piece in the middle is the one piece that we don't have control over.
Yeah. Do you think we're ready to put things in the rubric?
I saw a few good questions here that I might want to put another PR on top of this, but yeah, are we talking about going through the other?
Yeah, so I actually pasted it into the HackMD in case we want to like put it together here, and then we can copy and paste it into this document. Like Nisha, is that what you had in mind? We would update rubric.md after talking about it?
Yeah. I mean, I would assume that as far as the note taker is concerned, we'll copy all of this and put it, submit it as a PR to the repo.
Do we want to go over this as a group right now, or do we want to have someone take a stab at actually running through all of this, submit it as a PR, and have people give their opinions of whether or not we made a proper judgment?
Let's give it a shot now. See how far we get.
Okay.
I think
Because
for the
I think
sake
that
of-
it might uncover more unasked questions.
I just
Okay.
want to clarify, and maybe if we don't agree, this is something to talk about. Query a registry, like, let's be clear, that means the server is telling us, yeah? Or no?
This
Because
is
otherwise,
as a user, they want to query a registry. I'm going to say that as a user, there is a way to do it. I don't necessarily need the registry to do it for me as long as there is a way to do it. But someone can correct me.
I just
It's a
feel like
good
we're going to get checks
clarification.
for everything if we, go ahead, Steve.
Well, I was just going to go back. I think what you're getting at is the tag listing API has no filtering. So what I think you're saying, to do client filtering, I literally have to pull every tag and then figure out which ones are there, as opposed to say, hey, registry, what subset of tags do you have? So I do think there's a different, I'm not saying it's a dead end, right? That we've gone into this, assuming this was the problem, or assuming this might be a solution, but certainly not an efficient solution. So I think this is one of those, I think we want to differentiate where the registry can return the subset of what you're asking for versus, I don't know what you're asking for, so here's everything, page through it, and then have fun figuring it out. Because the data is there, it's just a matter of how much effort has to go into it.
And this gets into whether we want checks and X's, or do we want to have more of a granular, can be implemented on the client side inefficiently.
I'd just say put a bang exclamation point and then just put that, hey, can be solved through client implementation.
We'll have more symbols. We'll get into emojis before we're at the end of
Yeah,
this.
there's plenty of Unicode to go around.
So I have a suggestion. How about we just write a summary of what we think, rather than use like yes or no. So we can add all the nuances in there. So yes, it's possible, but requires a lot of work on the client side.
Yeah. For this one, should we just run through, and if it's a quick, easy yes, and then if we want to add more comment on there, we've got a good note taker. It looks like they're ready to start hitting answers on these things right now. So
Go for it, Brandon.
start digging in.
Mhm.
So as a user, I want to query a registry for stored artifacts by digest and tag. I'm going to say this one's probably a yes. because I can query with a tag list or query the individual tags, or it's right there in the index by digest and by tag. There is the ability to do this. Any debate on that? We'll find those edge cases I think people are looking for in the next questions, I think. So I want to query the registry for all stored artifacts that reference another artifact by its tag or digest. Make sure I understand this question, unless someone jumps in and just says that's a yes.
So what that means is if I have an image, for example, I want to find out all the other artifacts that reference that image.
Yeah, that's my understanding
Is
too.
that the
By
same as mono?
only supplying. No, so you just, I think I read the second as I just give you an image name and a tag and you tell me everything that references that. It's like a reverse lookup.
I'm not sure how it's different from one.
You're actually saying, please give me stored artifacts without giving it.
So for example, you have the index. Is it possible to, take a manifest, like, okay, I'm providing you a container image digest. Can you find the index that has that digest in it?
I think if you look at 1 and 2 together, I think 1 is, I want the original net monitor image or ice cream image, whatever we're calling it. I think that's what 1 is. I think 2 says, I want all the things that reference 1. In other words, because we wanted to make sure that the original tag and digest doesn't change as you add other information to it. So I think 1 is just saying, we didn't break anything. The original, I don't know what your canonical image is here. We use the net monitor image, but the net monitor image didn't change. I can still get that by its tag, by its digest, because the digest didn't change. You've lifted the tag onto an index, but that index, if everybody processes the indexes right, will direct me to the digest of that image. So number 1 says I can pull the net monitor image either directly or because you graphed an index by tag, I can still find it. So I think 1, you're fine. I think 2 is the interesting one where how do I find all the references to it? Because I have to look at an index, I have to look at tag matching. It works. This is just a matter of where the efficiencies comes in.
I would say you can do it, but not without some serious client-side processing.
Can we use, I'm still wrapping my head around this one. Can we use some different words? So let's say we've got a signature pointing to, or multiple signatures pointing to the same image. I'm seeing the first one saying, I give you the image, NetMonitor version 1, give me all the signatures for it.
I don't think, I don't read 1 as has anything to do with the signatures. I think 1 is the runtime needs to be able to run the net monitor image. Don't screw that up. This is like, don't break what works. Number 2 is before I deploy the image, I want to verify it has a signature that I trust. How do I get the signature for that image, for the net monitor image? That's what I see 2 is. And to Nisha's point, whether it's client side or server side, like client side processing is only really a problem when it's highly
Okay.
small objects. It's the registry implication. At least maybe that's just, I'm biased in how I think about it.
So in that case, I was misreading 1. 1 isn't even looking for the signature. It's just saying, give me the net monitor image.
Don't break what
Okay.
works. Kubernetes can still
Okay.
run it.
Okay, so no change on 1. We're still good there. I think 2, I'm still going to say we can still do that. It still works. It's not as efficient, but it still works. So I think we solved that one as well.
I think that's just the one back to the 1 versus 0, true versus false is there is a caveat in there is that it's not efficient. The registries will, because we have customers that have thousands of tags because they pushing daily things to a repo. So I'm sure Docker Hub is full of stuff as well. So the problem is without a server-side filtering API, The only way you know that you found all the references is literally pull every tag that's in that repo.
Yeah.
So I would
So
just call
move-
that out as, hey, this is going to be a server side heavy operation.
Client side, and I think we've got that in the notes. So
Well, it's server, because the server has to find it and serve it. I mean, yes, the client has to scroll through it, but the client's got some allocated compute.
the server in this case, I'm saying, is the registry server.
Correct.
So the registry server itself isn't doing any of the work for us. The registry server just gives us tags. It's up to the client that's querying the registry that
Work.
filters through that list of tags. And
It's
pulls
no
them all.
new work, but for a registry to serve all the page tags, that's not, it's not a no op.
It's increased
Okay,
load, but
Yeah.
it's not work. It's not
Code change.
it's not parsing any JSON. It's serving
Correct.
existing
Yeah.
objects it owns.
Yeah. All right. Query the registry for all artifacts filtered by type. And I think the particular type is the keyword here. And that's what we've got in there by saying it's an SBOM, this is the signature, that sort of thing. I think we've solved this one.
It's still on the client side. So when I get that list of tags, I'll sort through them and figure out which are the ones I care about.
Yes. And so artifacts by annotations, this one I'm going to say half. If it's the originator, yes. If you're pushing after the fact with the hash, then you can't filter by annotation. You have to actually query each one individually.
How is that different than getting the full tag listing though? Well, because you still have the data. You're just gonna have to, after all the tags, you're gonna have to figure out which tags might be what you need. And now you got to pull the manifest for each one to decide what you want to do.
Yeah, and so you actually have to query each one of these things to pull it to check that annotation to see if it's the one you want. I'm seeing this one as probably the person that wrote this question wanted a little bit more efficient than that. They
Do
wanted to
you
be
need-
able to have that query.
Josh has his hands raised.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I think probably what needs to be done at this point, since we're kind of like going back and forth about things. Nisha, like, should we update this rubric to be a little bit more with a scale? Having like a column for client or server, or I just feel like it's not efficient to actually, you can't just put yes or no. And I know some people have been saying this, but is that kind of the action here, since we have 7 minutes and only through a few of these?
I think it will be the action. I think our goal right now was just to dig through a bunch of them and make sure that we didn't have any new questions that were being thrown up that we didn't
Okay,
think to ask
carry on,
before.
carry on.
It's the first one. It's going to be more painful because we haven't tested this yet. So this is the test case.
Oh, I feel like there's more. I feel like there's more pain to come later on. Jason, you had your hand up.
Never assume that the pain only goes down.
no
yeah,
ending pain.
I wanted to ask a question. So we were talking about if I want to query using this proposal, if I want to query for all signatures for Alpine latest or whatever, I resolve Alpine latest to its digest. I look up Alpine latest manifest to see if any originator signatures or whatever in there. And then in order to see if I need some other stuff that is not in the original image, I do a tag list. It sounded like you were saying we need to pull for each item in the tag list, we need to pull it, parse it, understand whether it contains a signature. And I don't know if that's true. Is that true?
Well, if
I
we're
was referring to
querying for
for-
annotations,
Based
Yeah.
on annotations. Okay. So if it's only, if I just want all signatures and I will do with all signatures whatever I do later, I don't have to do that because I can just match on the tag name being .sig or whatever.
and that's .3. Yeah.
Okay.
Three
Gotcha.
three is good. 4, you're going to have to pull each one individually. And so if you've got to pull those annotations, you've got to actually pull each individual,
But that's at
probably
least,
the whole artifact, but yeah.
is the use case for things with this annotation, but not by type? Like my understanding of what the annotations would be are fairly type specific, like signature data is in an annotation, but wouldn't be in the SBOM.
Yeah, what they're looking at for this is they're saying, I want to put in the annotation what time this scan result was generated so that I can fetch just the most recent one. And you don't know that
Right.
just by looking at that hash. You've actually got to go through and pull these down.
I guess my point is, but in that case, I know what I'm looking for is not just with this annotation, but is also a scan result, or is also an SBOM, or is also a signature. So we're not going to iterate
Yeah.
through potentially tens of thousands of things parsing each manifest. We're going to first do a filter by
The-
signature type,
the-
and then
Depends
do a
on how many
filter.
scan results you have, but yeah, you can at least
Yeah,
filter
yeah,
the
yeah.
type out.
You could also have tens of millions of signatures if you want, but like at
Yep.
least we don't have to do a ton of extra work. This is something clients.
You're basically, you have to pull the manifest for each type to then decide. That's kind of what
Yes.
you're right. It is a subset.
Yes.
And the signature one was I was thinking is less of a concern because at least in the signatures, the idea is, all right, which signature, and the annotation has which signature in theory. So I can say, all right, I pull the manifests and now I can figure out, I really only want the Acme Rocket signature. Fine. The scan results a little bit more problematic because there will be lots of scan results. And now I do have to, there's no way of knowing which is the latest. So
Sure, but
it's-
at least
it's the
at
same
least in
problem,
doing,
but it's more just because there's more scan results than assumed signatures.
yeah.
If
at
you
least
do
in
this, you're
doing
going to
that-
want to have. Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, I was saying, at least in when I'm iterating through all the scan results, I can at least be smart and not pull any signature manifests because
Right,
I
you can
know
filter by
that's,
type.
yeah.
But if you've got a scan server that's generating a scan every day, I would recommend that you have something there doing some kind of garbage collection that goes and gets rid of all but the last 3 or 4 scan results. Just starts deleting those because you don't want them anymore. And that would be a client-side filter that you have to implement. So again, not ideal, but could be done inefficiently. Josh, you got something?
Sorry, go ahead, Josh.
Josh?
Maybe not. Maybe not.
Oh, sorry. I think my hand was up from last time. Carry on.
Okay. What you got, Steve?
No, okay, this is the where like number one, like it's just excuse, like you always want to give me, or at least get one checkbox. So let's just say like number one is complete check, very clear. I think the thing that we want to be able to, and there's gonna be others that it's like, nope, just doesn't work, just not supported. Sorry. And that might be okay. The ones that are in this gray area, I think can we just agree that we put some kind of indicator on it that says it's not a 1 or a 0, and then you look to the column for description, and then it says, okay, what does this mean? I don't know if they all become inefficient client server kind of differentiators, then maybe that's a simplistic answer, but I think we want to just be able to differentiate the ones that are clearly just solve it because let's just say the registry does index types and annotations. We want to be able to differentiate that solution versus, yeah, the registry didn't have to make any changes, but the registry is going to have more load and the client has to do more processing. How do you differentiate those two proposals?
I
So I'm just
think
saying that-
Jason's hand is
capture that.
up and then mine.
Go ahead, Nisha.
And then we're out of time.
Oh, we're out of time for 2 minutes. Okay, it seems to me that there's a general consensus that at least the filtering part, most of it can be done, but with a lot of client-side processing, like the server doesn't do anything. Can we? I mean, the way that I've been taking these notes is I've not used any of the yes, no things. I've just like written a little note. And most of it is yes, but inefficient.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a partial score in there of some kind, or we might have something in there that just says it's client side or it's dependent on implementation decisions and stuff like that. So there's going to be more than just a yes or no. I don't think we come up with all the different possibilities for what the in-betweens are yet. And I think it's going to take us looking through some of the proposals to figure out what all those in-betweens are.
Sounds good. I think we can publish some of this though. Does
Yeah.
anyone want to use Marina's ASCII emoji for partial?
I've done other places question marks. We might want to come out with like a little subnotation, like 1 means this, and just put a little footer on the bottom of it. I'll figure something out and just get a PR out there.
Okay, thank you then.
Yep. Steve, I was going to say you get the last word, but we ran out of time.
Thanks, Brandon, for running us through this.
I didn't take my hand down.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, Brandon,
Hey,
this
really-
looks great.
Yeah,
Thanks, Brandon. Good baseline.
really quick.
Yep.
Next week,
Go ahead.
should we hope that we get another proposal and do the same thing, or do we want to carry on with the?
I
rubric?
think we would be taking a while on this one, but I have a C almost ready.
It's just that it will take us 4 weeks to get through the proposals.
Yeah, we got another-
so-
I don't know what to do with that.
I do think it's good to work through, take one and test the questions. And the fact that this is the baseline of do nothing is a more simplistic one than probably any of the proposals. So, because we have to figure out how we're going to put the rubric together anyway. And if we're trying to do the rubric across each and every one of these things, I don't know if we'll make much progress. So I think testing the rubric in the next meeting with this as a baseline, that seems like a good idea.
Okay.
That's
All
my.
right, let's try to improve the rubric then, maybe by next week at least.
If we have another proposal to look at to compare to this, though, I would also be interested. So we will have a meeting next week, no matter what.
Awesome. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Well,
thanks.
we can
Alright.
say that Jason's trying to moon us all. Is that what that is?
I mooned
think
you
that's exactly
7
what that is.
times. All right. See you guys.
See you next
Bye-bye,
week.
Thanks.